Imagine the scene. Alexander the Great, master of the known world, has just conquered Greece. He arrives in the city of Corinth, and it's exactly what you'd expect. The most powerful politicians, the most respected thinkers, the wealthiest citizens, they're all scrambling for a moment of his attention, hoping to gain his favor. But there's one person who's conspicuously absent. The one philosopher Alexander was actually curious to meet hasn't bothered to show up. So Alexander, followed by his entire entourage, decides to seek this man out. They don't find him in a grand academy or a scholar's library. They find him in the city square, lounging in the sun next to what looks like a giant clay jar. This is his home. When Alexander, the most powerful man alive, stands before him, casting a shadow over the sun-bathing philosopher, he makes a generous offer. "Ask of me whatever you wish." The man in the jar barely looks up. He squints at the king and his small army, and with complete indifference replies, "Stand out of my sunlight." What kind of person has the audacity to dismiss the master of the world as a mere annoyance? Who was Diogenes of Sinope, and why did he believe that true freedom wasn't found in a palace, but in a barrel?
That encounter, I mean, it's just legendary, isn't it? The ultimate power meeting between the king of the world and, well, the man in the jar. But it's not just a fantastic story.
Yeah.
No, it's like the perfect philosophical mic drop. It really captures Diogenes' whole project, his entire way of thinking.
Okay, so what's the mission for us here in this deep dive? We want to get past just the cool stories, right?
Exactly. We need to move beyond those, famous anecdotes, great as they are, and really understand the philosophical force of cynicism. Because Diogenes wasn't just some eccentric dude living rough.
He wasn't just being difficult for the sake of it.
Not at all. He was, I think, a pretty systematic thinker. And he was engaged in something we now call immanent critique.
Immanent critique. Okay, that sounds academic. What does that actually mean in practice? Especially thinking about ancient Greece.
Right, it sounds a bit heavy. But the core idea is pretty straightforward. Diogenes wanted to challenge social norms, what the Greeks called nomos.
The rules, the customs, how things are done.
Precisely. But he didn't do it by, say, going off to a mountaintop and writing a book about some perfect ideal society somewhere else.
Like Plato, maybe, with his Republic?
Sort of, yeah. Instead, Diogenes stayed right inside the city, in the thick of it. And from there, he forced society to look at its own flaws, its own hypocrisies.
Yeah.
Right there in the marketplace.
So critique from within.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wasn't offering some abstract theory perfection. What he offered was his life, a life of, let's say, deliberate, very public imperfection. And he used that life to expose what he saw as the moral bankruptcy of places like Athens and Corinth.
He was asking them, basically, why do you care so much about stuff that just makes you unhappy?
That's a huge part of it. And to really get that critique, we have to start where he started, which, interestingly enough, involves a major personal disaster that became his whole philosophical launch pad.
Yeah, it kicks off with a crime, which is always a good hook. And he wasn't born into this life, was he? He came from money. Significant privilege, actually, in Sinope.
That context is absolutely crucial. He was born around the early 4th century BC. His father, Hicesius, was a trapezites.
Which is basically a banker. Or a money changer.
Yeah, essentially. Handling money, validating coins, exchanging foreign currency for trade. This was a position of immense public trust and wealth, obviously.
So Diogenes had the upbringing you'd expect. Good education.
Oh, absolutely. The education of a nobleman. Okay. Athletics, rhetoric, philosophy, the works, which makes his later life of, utter destitution even more striking. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice he made after seeing the inside of that wealthy commercial world.
But then it all came crashing down. There was this huge scandal, right? Something about debasing the coinage?
Precisely. That's the turning point. Now, whether Diogenes himself was directly involved or if he just took the fall for his father, we don't know for sure. The sources are a bit unclear.
But the result was the same.
The result was exile. And debasing coinage, messing with the silver content, mixing in cheaper metals, that wasn't just like, cheating on your taxes. It was a massive fraud. It destroyed public trust, wrecked the economy. It was seen as a fundamental attack on the polis, the city itself.
So he gets kicked out, forced to leave Sinope, ends up in Athens, and then later Corinth.
Yes. And here's where it gets philosophically interesting. He takes this act, this crime of economic sabotage, and he turns it into his philosophical slogan.
Wait, the crime itself becomes the slogan?
Yeah. The Cynic movement later used this phrase as their kind of credo, kuration to nomisma.
Which means?
To alter the currency. or to deface the coinage. And this phrase is just brilliant because it has this perfect double meaning.
Okay, I see. Literally defacing coins, the crime he was accused of.
Right, but figuratively. Altering, challenging, defacing political custom. Nomos itself, the very rules and values of society.
Wow. So he gets exiled for rejecting the physical coin, the literal money. And then he embraces that exile as his freedom to reject the social coin, the values, the customs.
You've got it. He reframed the entire catastrophe. For an ancient Greek, exile was terrifying. Losing your city, your family, your whole identity, it was considered one of the worst possible fates.
But Diogenes saw it differently.
He claimed it was liberation. He basically said, exile is what made me a philosopher. You took away my fancy clothes, my status, my connection to Sinope's wealth, and in doing that, you freed me from all your stupid material rules. He declared independence the minute they threw him out.
And that defiance, that independence, it becomes physical. It becomes visible in how he chooses to live. Which brings us to his home, the famous, well, not barrel.
Right, let's clear that up straight away. The image we have of him in a wooden wine barrel, that's probably anachronistic. Those kinds of barrels weren't really common then. He lived in a pithos.
A pithos. Describe that for us.
Okay, imagine a massive ceramic jar. Huge. Sometimes up to like 6 feet tall, maybe even more. Made of clay, fired hard.
What were they used for?
Primarily for storage. Think bulk goods. Wine, olive oil, grain. They were essential for the economy, especially in the Bronze and Iron Ages, often partly buried to keep the contents cool and stable. They were, in a way, symbols of agricultural surplus and commercial wealth.
Okay, so these huge jars were part of the infrastructure of trade and storage. And Diogenes chooses one of these as his house, but where does he put it?
Right in the middle of things, often in the agora, the marketplace. And to really get the impact of this choice, this is where we need to think about the specific setting, like Corinth.
Corinth, which, as you said, was a major hub, rich, busy, all about trade.
Exactly. Corinth was practically swimming in wealth. Commerce was its lifeblood. So in the Corinthian agora, seeing pithoi wouldn't be unusual. They'd be associated with goods coming in, goods being stored, transactions happening. They represented successful commerce.
But Diogenes takes one that's not functional.
That's the key part of his critique. He didn't just live in a pithos. He seems to have deliberately chosen one that was discarded. Maybe cracked, broken, basically useless for its original purpose. Commercial waste.
So he takes the symbol of commercial success, finds a broken one,
and makes it his home. Right there, in the bustling heart of the economic center. He weaponized the symbol. He took this object built to hold wealth, this piece of failed commercial pottery, and turned it into a statement.
What kind of statement?
A profoundly visual one. He's basically forcing all those busy merchants, the wealthy citizens, to constantly look at the end result of their frantic obsession, as one scholar puts it, with what could be stored, bought, and sold.
He's saying, look, all your effort, all your wealth, it ends up as junk. And this junk, it's enough for me. I'm happy in your trash.
Pretty much. He's living in this discarded vessel, demonstrating that real value, real sufficiency, isn't found in accumulating more stuff, but in needing almost nothing. His home was a constant, silent critique of their entire value system.
It must have been incredibly uncomfortable, though, physically, living in a clay jar in the Greek sun or rain.
Oh, absolutely miserable, I imagine. Hot, probably smelly, totally exposed. But that discomfort was part of the performance, part of the critique.
It wasn't meant to be a cozy, tiny home.
Not at all. It was a stage, a pulpit, maybe even a kind of self-inflicted torture device, in a way. By living like that, right next to all the abundance of the market he couldn't afford, he was constantly performing his renunciation. He was living proof that you could be happy, or at least self-sufficient, with literally nothing but cast-off rubbish.
And this extreme lifestyle, this choice, it directly leads to that core Cynic idea of autarky, right? Self-sufficiency.
Autarkia. Yes, that's the practical virtue they aimed for above all else. Diogenes deliberately, radically stripped down his possessions. You know the list. A cloak, which doubled as his bedding.
A stick for walking and maybe defense.
And a wallet or a small bag, presumably for begging for scraps. That was it. But this wasn't just, early minimalism for aesthetic reasons.
It wasn't about decluttering his jar.
No, it was a political commitment. Every single thing he got rid of was one less thing he needed from society, one less hold society had on him, one less dependency.
Which brings us to that famous story about the cup, his last possession almost.
It's such a perfect illustration of pushing autarkia to its absolute limit. He'd already gotten rid of almost everything. but he still carried a simple cup, presumably wooden or clay, for drinking.
Okay, seems reasonable enough.
Until he saw a peasant boy, just a child, drinking water straight from his cupped hands at a fountain.
And Diogenes had a realization.
A profound one. He supposedly exclaimed, "Fool that I am to have been carrying superfluous baggage all this time." And he threw the cup away.
Just like that, nature provides the cup.
Exactly. That act kind of finalized his commitment. He'd found the truly natural way. He demonstrated, again, in a very public, physical way, that happiness, or at least contentment, was completely independent of manufactured goods, material comforts, and therefore independent of the society that makes and values those things.
It really sounds like he achieved a kind of invulnerability. If you own nothing, desire nothing, society offers, what can anyone, even Alexander the Great, take from you or offer you?
That's precisely the freedom he was aiming for. It's about immunity. As the later Stoic philosopher Seneca put it, looking back at Diogenes, there is nothing in Diogenes that belongs to you anymore, O fate.
Wow. Fate has no grip on him.
Because he has nothing for fate to grab onto. Nothing to protect, nothing to ensure, nothing to lose sleep over. That's the radical self-sufficiency he embodied.
Okay, so we have the static image and the man in the jar, but Diogenes wasn't just sitting there, was he? He was active, provocative. He earned a nickname.
Oh, yeah. He became famous, or maybe infamous, for his public performances, which earned him the name Cynicus.
Or dog.
The dog-like one. And initially, that was definitely an insult. Dogs in ancient Greece, especially stray dogs, were seen as shameless. They lived on the streets, scavenged, performed bodily functions in public. They had no regard for social niceties.
But Diogenes didn't reject the name.
He embraced it. He completely owned it, took the slur, and wore it like a badge of honor. He even justified it, apparently, saying things like, well, dogs live simply, they guard their principles fiercely, they know who their friends are, and they bite their enemies. And they certainly don't care about your silly human status games.
So he leaned into the shamelessness aspect.
Absolutely. Plato, and this is a famous line, supposedly called him Socrates gone mad, which is actually quite revealing, isn't it?
How so?
Well, it acknowledges the philosophical root. Plato saw the connection to Socratic questioning, the challenging of assumptions. But he was clearly horrified by Diogenes' methods. The madness was the radical, physical, shameless execution of that questioning.
And these actions, they weren't random outbursts. They were deliberate, almost like performance art.
I think that's a really good way to look at it.
Right.
His actions were absolutely a form of early social activism or street theater. He used his own body as his primary philosophical tool, his instrument.
How did that work? What kind of things did he do?
Well, he deliberately performed basic bodily functions out in the open. Eating, sleeping, sometimes even defecating or public sex, right there in the marketplace or public squares. Places governed by strict rules of decorum.
Okay, why? What was the point of that? Beyond just shocking people.
It was a direct confrontation with the moral order, with nomos. Society dictates that these perfectly natural human needs, hunger, desire, excretion, functions associated with, say, Demeter and Aphrodite must be hidden away, done in private. They become sources of shame.
Right, things you just don't do in public.
But Diogenes' argument, through his actions, was, why not? These things are natural, physis. They're necessary. If it's not inherently shameful to do the thing, why is it shameful to do it in public? He was exposing the arbitrary nature of those particular social rules.
He's forcing people to question why they feel shame about natural things.
Exactly. And the most notorious example of this, the one people always remember, was the public masturbation.
Yeah, that one definitely stands out. How did he justify that?
Well, again, it wasn't just about being crude. When people inevitably criticized him, his famous response, his quip was, if only it were so easy to soothe hunger by rubbing an empty belly.
Okay, there's more going on there than just shock value.
Definitely. It's layered. First, it's an extreme act of self-ownership. My body, my desires, my control. Total autarkia in the physical sense. Second, by contrasting the ease of satisfying that particular urge himself with the difficulty of satisfying hunger, especially for a beggar like him, surrounded by food he couldn't access in the marketplace, he's making a sharp point.
That's the point.
He's highlighting the absurdity, maybe even the immorality, of a society that puts such heavy restrictions and shame around natural desires, while seemingly ignoring or even causing the profound, unnatural suffering of hunger and poverty. Why are we so hung up on this, he's asking, when people are starving?
It's a critique of misplaced priorities.
A very visceral one. And this kind of intense confrontational style relied on another key Greek concept, Parrhesia.
Parrhesia, frank speech, speaking truth to power.
Yes, but more than just speaking. It's about speaking frankly, bluntly, even offensively as necessary, to expose folly and hypocrisy. It's a kind of fearless speech. And Diogenes was a master of it, not just in words, but in actions. Which brings us to maybe his most iconic piece of street theater.
The lamp.
The lamp. Wandering through the agora, the busiest part of the city, in broad daylight, midday sun blazing.
Holding a lit lamp.
Holding lit lamp, peering around, and when people asked him what on earth he was doing, he'd reply, "I am looking for a man." Or sometimes, "I'm looking for an honest man," or a wise man.
He wasn't actually expecting to find someone hiding.
Of course not. The absurdity was the message. The lamp wasn't needed for light. The sun was out. It was pure symbolism.
So what did it symbolize?
He was essentially making a public accusation against the entire city. He was implying that despite the bright daylight, the city was shrouded in moral darkness. The light of the lamp was needed not for physical sight, but to reveal the lack of true humanity, true honesty, true wisdom among the citizens.
Especially the powerful ones, presumably. The merchants, the politicians he saw every day.
You'd have to assume so. He was using the city square as his stage, turning his search into this ongoing performance. He forced everyone who saw him, everyone who heard about him, to wonder, am I the kind of person he's looking for? Or am I part of the darkness? He was making them question the roles they were playing, the values they held.
It sounds like he saved some of his sharpest critique, though, not just for the average person on the street, but for the philosophical establishment, particularly Plato.
Oh, definitely. His clashes with Plato are legendary and really important. They highlight the fundamental difference between cynicism, with its focus on lived reality, and the more mainstream, abstract philosophy of someone like Plato.
Diogenes wasn't a fan of abstract theory.
Not at all. He relentlessly rejected it, especially things like Plato's theory of forms, these perfect, unchanging, invisible ideals of things. Diogenes was all about the concrete, the visible, the practical. Plato was building these grand intellectual systems up in the clouds. Diogenes was trying to pull philosophy right down to earth, literally.
And the most famous example of that is the chicken story, right?
A plucked chicken. It's brilliant. So Plato, trying to define essential qualities, apparently defined human in his academy as basically a featherless biped, an animal that walks on two legs and has no feathers.
Okay. Sounds technically accurate, maybe. Bit dry.
So Diogenes thought it was ridiculous. So what did he do? He didn't write a long philosophical treatise arguing against it.
No.
He went out, found a chicken, plucked all his feathers off, and then apparently just burst into Plato's academy, threw the poor bird down in front of everyone, and announced, here is Plato's human.
Oh, wow. That must have caused a stir.
You imagine. The story goes that Plato was forced to amend his definition, adding the qualifier with broad, flat nails to distinguish humans from plucked chickens. Diogenes made his point perfectly. Abstract definitions that ignore messy reality can lead to absurd conclusions. You have to look at the actual thing.
And he had a similar issue with the whole idea of Platonic forms, like the perfect idea of a table or a cup.
Yeah, he found that completely baffling too.
Yeah.
His famous retort to Plato on that was supposedly, for my part, Plato, your table and your cup I can see, but tablehood and cuphood, those I cannot see at all.
He's demanding empirical evidence. Show me the form.
Exactly. He rejected these invisible universals. For him, truth wasn't found in abstract contemplation. It was found in dialectical praxis, in the give and take of argument grounded in concrete action and observable reality. His philosophical contribution wasn't really about building new theories. It was about exposing the weaknesses and contradictions in existing ones through these immediate, often crude, but undeniably effective actions.
Okay, so if we boil it down, his core philosophical engine seems to be this clash, this opposition between physis and nomos, nature versus custom.
That's absolutely central. His constant refrain, his goal, was urging people to live kata physin in accordance with nature.
But what did that really mean? Was he just saying we should all go live in the woods like animals?
No, and that's a common misunderstanding. It wasn't a call to just abandon reason and become, brute beasts. Diogenes fully acknowledged that reason, logos, is part of human nature.
So, use our reason.
To strip away the unreasonable parts of custom. To question and discard those social norms, those nomois that are purely artificial, that are expensive in terms of time or money or happiness, and that aren't actually necessary for a good human life.
So it's about finding a rational, truly human way to live, but one that's not burdened by, say, silly rules about etiquette or the need to accumulate wealth or follow arbitrary traditions.
Exactly that. Live according to your natural needs, guided by reason, and ignore the conventional stuff that just gets in the way. However,
There's a however.
well, it's important to see that even the cynics recognize there might be limits to pure naturalism. Those are a rather grim little anecdote. Its truth is debated, of course. But it suggests Diogenes might have died
From what?
from trying to eat a raw octopus,
Seriously, raw octopus? Why?
presumably as the ultimate act of living kata fusin, rejecting even the custom of cooking food.
And it didn't end well.
Apparently not. If the story is true, it kind of demonstrates the potential absurdity or even danger of trying to completely exclude all nomos from human life. Some customs, like cooking certain foods or basic hygiene, might actually be pretty natural and necessary for us. So it shows that physis and nomos are perhaps in a more complex, dynamic relationship. It's not always a simple opposition.
Okay, so pursuing this natural, independent life wasn't easy then. It wasn't just lounging around in a jar telling kings to get lost. It required effort.
Oh, tremendous effort. It wasn't about laziness at all. In fact, the Cynics put huge emphasis on ponos.
Ponos.
Toil, hardship, labor, effort. Diogenes famously claimed that hostility to pleasure itself was the highest pleasure, but only because overcoming difficulty, enduring hardship, grants you true self-mastery, true freedom.
So you have to work at being free.
Absolutely. He advocated for rigorous training, what they called ascesis. And it was double training. Training the mind, obviously, but also training the body. This physical and mental discipline was the how. It was the mechanism for achieving that autarkia, that self-sufficiency.
How so? How does training make you self-sufficient?
Well, the idea was if you could train yourself to endure the worst that nature could throw at you, cold, heat, hunger, pain, and the worst that society could throw at you, insults, poverty, discomfort, then you were truly free. Nothing could compel you. You didn't need anything from anyone.
And this involves some pretty extreme physical practices.
Yeah, the stories are quite something. We hear about him deliberately embracing freezing cold bronze statues in the middle of winter to harden himself against the cold.
Oh.
Or rolling in scorching hot sand during the summer, walking barefoot everywhere, regardless of the terrain or weather. It was a kind of self-inflicted boot camp.
Inoculating himself against discomfort.
That's a great way to put it. He made this contrast very clear in some anecdotes, especially comparing himself to Plato again. There were stories about Plato visiting the court of Dionysius, the tyrant of Syracuse, seeking favor, maybe funding, living in luxury.
Which required him to be subservient, presumably, to flatter the tyrant.
Exactly. Plato sought comfort and influence, which meant he had to please the powerful. Diogenes, on the other hand, embraced self-imposed hardship. He chose the cold statue over the warm palace. And that choice, that ponos, granted him absolute freedom. He didn't need to please any master, not even Alexander the Great.
And this dedication to ponos, to meaningful toil, also made him really critical of another group known for physical training, athletes.
Yes. He seemed to have a particular disdain for athletes. He ridiculed them quite often.
Why? You'd think he might respect their discipline.
He saw their training, their ponos, as fundamentally wasted, misdirected. He thought they overspecialized their bodies, making themselves, as he apparently put it, built up with pork and beef. Basically, gluttonous and strong, only in one specific way.
Useful for the games, maybe, but not for life.
Right. And what were they training for? To win some contest, often for a prize that was just a symbolic crown made of, like parsley or olive leaves, a worthless sprig. He saw this as the ultimate trivial pursuit.
So the athlete toils for a fleeting external reward, often meaningless in itself.
Exactly. While the cynic, through their own rigorous ponos and ascesis, trained for something internal, something permanent.
Which was?
Kalokagathia. It's a complex Greek term, but it essentially means nobility of character, virtue, the excellence of the whole person, mind, and body, integrated toward goodness.
Not just bulging muscles.
Not just bulging muscles, no. The athlete had mastered the physical, perhaps, but completely neglected the soul, the psyche, the character. Diogenes apparently liked to compare the cynic struggle to the mythical labors of Heracles. Heracles achieved immortality not by winning races, but by overcoming monstrous hardships through incredible toil. That's the model. The cynic's toil leads to virtue, self-control, true freedom rewards that last.
Okay, so by rejecting wealth, conventions, the city's definition of success, even the goals of athletes, Diogenes is basically rejecting the entire structure of the Greek polis, the city-state. How did he define himself then? If he's not a citizen of Corinth or Athens or Sinope, what is he?
That's where he introduces one of the most revolutionary and, frankly, enduring political ideas to come out of ancient philosophy. When people asked him, "Where are you from? What's your city?" A fundamental question for Greek identity, he gave a shocking answer.
What did he say?
He declared himself a cosmopolites.
Cosmopolites. Citizen of the world.
Citizen of the cosmos, yeah. Citizen of the world, or citizen of the universe. Now, you have to understand, for a Greek person in the 4th century BC, this was mind-blowing. Your polis was everything. It was your community, your laws, your gods, your identity, your safety net. To be Apolites without a city was a state of terror, of non-belonging.
And Diogenes just casually says, yeah, I don't belong to any of your little cities. I belong to everything.
Pretty much. It was primarily, I think, a negative claim at first. It was a profound rejection of that localized, often fiercely tribal city-state identity that was the bedrock of Hellenic civilization. He was effectively saying, your city walls, your local laws, your tribal loyalties, these are all artificial constructs. They are nomos, not physis.
They're not natural.
Right. He chose instead to align himself with the cosmos, the natural universal order of things.
But isn't the term itself contradictory? Cosmos implies the natural or the universe, right?
Yes.
But polites means citizen, which comes from polis, the city. It implies laws, structure, community.
That's the absolute genius of it. You've hit on why it's such a powerful philosophical concept.
Yeah.
It is a paradox.
Yeah.
It's what some scholars call a propedeutic paradox, meaning it's a paradox designed to teach, to provoke thought.
How does it teach?
By its very contradiction. He had to use the language of the city, polites, to reject the city. He's forcing his listeners to confront the fact that they are simultaneously members of their specific artificial community, the polis, and members of the vast natural universe, the cosmos. Which identity is more fundamental? Right. Which allegiance matters more?
It's a direct challenge to their whole worldview.
A fundamental one.
Yeah.
And it cracked open the door for centuries of later philosophical and political thought, particularly in the Hellenistic and Roman periods, where the idea of a shared humanity transcending city boundaries became much more prominent.
Okay, so Diogenes' brand of cynicism is incredibly radical. It's confrontational, it's performance-based. It's, frankly, really hard to imagine society functioning if everyone lived like him.
Absolutely impossible, yes.
So how did this philosophy, this way of life that seems so antisocial in some ways, actually end up influencing the world? Did it just fizzle out?
Not at all. It didn't fizzle out, but it did transform. You're right. Cynicism, as Diogenes lived it, was maybe too abrasive, too purely critical to form the basis of a stable society. Think of it like the intellectual equivalent of controlled demolition. It was brilliant at showing the weaknesses in the existing structure, poking holes in convention.
But not great at building something new in its place.
Not directly, no. And that's why its true, lasting, transformative legacy comes through its role as the direct philosophical ancestor of a much more influential school of thought. Stoicism.
Ah, okay. Yeah. I know Stoicism is huge, especially later in Rome. How did that connection happen? Is there a clear line?
There's a very clear lineage. Diogenes himself mentored another Cynic philosopher named Crates of Thebes. Crates was apparently a bit gentler, maybe more socially engaged than Diogenes, but still very much a Cynic.
Okay. Diogenes to Crates.
And Crates, in turn, mentored a young man named Zeno of Citium. And Zeno is the founder of Stoicism.
Wow. So there's a direct teacher-student line from Diogenes to the founder of Stoicism.
Exactly. It's a crucial evolutionary chain. You can almost see Stoicism as taking the radical insights and lifestyle recommendations of Cynicism, things like the absolute focus on autarkia, self-sufficiency, and the idea that virtue is the only true good.
The core Cynic values we've been talking about.
Right. Stoicism took those core values and essentially systematize them, formalize them. They built a whole philosophical structure around them, complete with detailed logic, physics, ethics. They made the core ideals more accessible, more livable for people within a functioning society.
So Cynicism was maybe the raw, untamed fire.
Yeah.
And Stoicism was like building a controlled furnace, harnessing that energy.
That's a fantastic analogy, exactly. They share those fundamental principles, virtue, self-sufficiency, but their application, their attitude towards the world is quite different.
How so? What's the main shift?
Well, while the Cynics, especially Diogenes, used that immanent critique to reject and actively confront, Damaso, the social conventions, the Stoics had a different take. Based on their understanding of universal reason, they came to see many human constructs, things like family, laws, community, participation in public life, as actually natural and necessary for humans as social beings.
So a Stoic wouldn't live in a jar in the marketplace?
Generally, no. A Stoic philosopher would teach you how to live virtuously within the structures of society, how to be a good citizen, a good parent, a good leader, while maintaining inner freedom. A Cynic like Diogenes taught you how to achieve freedom by living virtuously against or perhaps outside those structures.
And the Stoic approach involved more. Acceptance. Accepting things you can't change.
Yes, that's a key difference. Stoicism places huge emphasis on understanding what is within our control, our judgments, our responses, our character, and what is not within our control, external events, health, reputation, the actions of others. They taught acceptance, or even indifference, towards those external things.
Whereas Diogenes seemed to be actively fighting against external constraints, or at least demonstrating his complete independence from them.
Precisely. He didn't just accept hardship. He sought it out through ponos to prove it had no power over him. He didn't just accept social norms. He actively violated them to show their emptiness. It's a much more confrontational stance, which is why later Stoics like Epictetus or Seneca often looked back at Diogenes with a kind of awe.
They admired him.
Immensely. Epictetus called Diogenes a divine messenger, basically a scout sent by the gods to show humanity that happiness was possible, completely independent of external circumstances, possessions, or status. Seneca pointed to him as the ultimate example of self-sufficiency, saying that fate itself had no hold over him. They saw him as demonstrating the ideal in its purest, most extreme form.
It's fascinating how that raw cynic impulse gets refined but still respected. Now, thinking about today, that core idea of Diogenes, stripping away the non-essential, living with less, focusing on inner freedom, it seems to echo really strongly in some modern movements, doesn't it? Like minimalism or anti-consumerism.
Oh, absolutely. This is where Diogenes' challenge feels incredibly current, I think. His whole life poses a very direct question to us today.
What's the question?
It's about the motivation behind our modern versions of, say, minimalism or simple living. Are these movements a genuine search for the kind of radical freedom and self-ownership that Diogenes achieved, a true attempt to escape the grip of consumer culture and social pressure? Or do they sometimes risk becoming just another lifestyle trend, another form of consumption in a way? Curating the perfect minimalist aesthetic, buying the right sustainable products, perhaps still seeking validation and status just through different means.
Yeah, I see that distinction. Diogenes wasn't trying to create a beautiful, Instagrammable jar life.
Definitely not. His goal wasn't primarily about the absence of stuff. It was about achieving complete and utter self-ownership, freedom from need, freedom from desire for external validation, freedom from the opinions of others, even the opinion of Alexander the Great.
Owning yourself so completely that nothing and no one else can own you.
That's the heart of it. It wasn't about having less. It was about being more, in the sense of being entirely self-defined and self-sufficient. That radical core idea, stripping away everything non-essential, all the social noise, to get down to the fundamental facts of human existence and build your freedom from there. That's why it keeps popping up.
Whenever people start questioning the status quo.
Exactly. Whenever the climate is right, for counterculture, for challenging assumptions, for philosophical provocation, you see echoes of him or direct references in thinkers across the centuries. Diderot in the Enlightenment, Nietzsche, Foucault in the 20th century. He represents this enduring strand of radical critique.
So, in the end, Diogenes really did force a confrontation, didn't he? Using his life, his body, even that broken piece of pottery, as these instruments to make people face the real cost, the potential emptiness of what they called civilization.
He absolutely did. And that confrontation loops us right back around to where we started, in a way.
Yeah.
Back to that original crime, the exile, the slogan. The man who was supposedly exiled for debasing the currency.
Per accuratien to nomisma.
He took that accusation and transformed his entire life into a philosophical command. Go ahead, revalue the currency, but not the silver coins. Revalue the currency of your social norms, your beliefs, your desires.
Yeah.
That's the real challenge of cynicism. The truly radical act that Diogenes invites us even now to consider.
Yes.
Is that maybe all our external markers of worth, our wealth, our status, our job titles, even the respect we might get from the most powerful people in the world, maybe all of that is just false coin, counterfeit currency. Until we undertake the real ponos, the necessary toil of restamping our own internal definition of value. We actually have the power, he suggests, to define ourselves as completely self-sufficient, to be utterly unimpressed by the shadows cast by kings and emperors. Diogenes' life is this stark demonstration that freedom isn't something handed down from above. It's not granted by rulers or defined by your culture. It's an act of creation. It's a continuous, defiant, maybe even uncomfortable choice to own your own mind.